as Alexa and I sort of thought about how this conference might play out, we thought it might be wise to start each hour with a little bit of filler as people sort of join given their particular schedules. And during that time, talk a little bit about issues related to the book and the topics that might not come up in the conversations. And I thought it might be nice this second hour to ask you, Alexa, a little bit about some of the editing choices you made, especially when it comes to the language people
Mhm.
use to talk about these issues. The language seems to me, as a guy who in his mid 50s, it seems to be changing so quickly. It's hard for me to keep up with it. So, how did you work through the language issues?
Absolutely. Yeah. Language is definitely always changing, and it can feel really overwhelming to feel like anything that you say, you could potentially be doing something wrong and causing harm. And I think that sort of approach isn't really helpful, to if you're coming at sort of saying the right thing is like policing everyone else, no one leaves that conversation feeling happy. I think that the perspective really needs to be more about coming from a place of humility, just like we were speaking about earlier, that we are all always trying to learn, and that not only language evolving is not starting from a zero and working towards absolute perfection. Eventually, we're going to find the perfect language. That's not how it works, It's about in this moment, in this time, what are people responding to, and what do people how do people feel seen and feel welcomed, and that's something that, because it's always changing, requires constant attention, requires constant availability, humility, listening, and learning. And I think that, because I have a degree in gender studies, I happen to have some degree of knowledge about this, and it's something that I really love to share. So in editing the book, I really tried to read for people's intentions, because everyone has their own area of expertise, and mine in this case is gendered language, but the folks writing their essays, their expertise is what they're writing about, and it's not language. And so how can I use my expertise to help their message come through further? So some pretty concrete changes that I made that are things that you probably wouldn't think of, but are just sort of approaches we can all take to make our language a little more welcoming to those listening to us. One that might seem strange is that in general, I try to steer away from using the words male and female. I prefer to use the words man and woman. Obviously, it's not wrong to say male and female, and in some contexts, it's the most accurate. For instance, one of our authors in the book is a medical doctor, and I think in a medical context, that's the best option for using male and female. The reason why I think that often man and woman is more accurate and more loving is that man and woman specifically describe someone's gender. Now, 90% of the time, unless, you birthed them, you are them, or you're their doctor, you probably don't know what someone's genitals are. I doubt it. And male and female are terms meant to describe people's bodies. Now, sometimes in conversations, especially about trans issues, we want to talk about bodies, but bodies are a sticky subject, and they're also a really private subject. And so even when we're talking about people's physicality, how people were assigned at birth, I always want to forefront people's gender, because gender is something that people are displaying outwardly, that they're owning, that they're exploring as a part of their identity, that they're often really proud of. So instead of fixating on their body, which maybe, has a lot of tense emotions around it, I want to highlight their gender by saying man and woman, because this is something that's really celebrated. They're choosing intentionally. So when you are, for instance, talking about being cisgender, I'm a cisgender woman. Saying a cisgender female is not only not the most accurate, but also sort of gives an impression of not being as welcoming, being more fixated on my body instead of my gender, which is woman.
Man, I've got a long way to go to come up to speed. Thank you for your patience with me. It's nice to read in the chats that Shannon, who's queer, says she's queer, but she can't keep up with the language either. So
Absolutely. And
I'm not alone.
It's not about getting an A on the test. It's about being an open and willing participant in the conversation and being willing to say, hey, I don't know, man.